Today, I'm joined by Emily Hall-Strutt, Director of Next Tech Girls, an organisation working to create real pathways for girls and young women into tech careers. Emily's leading important work around early exposure, role models and inclusion, and she'll be speaking at Cloud and AI Infrastructure on the 4th and the 5th of March 2026. Next Tech Girls was founded to inspire girls and young women to pursue tech careers at a moment when their interest often drops off. So with that, my first question to you is, from your work, what is the most overlooked reason girls disengage from tech pathways early on?
I think that's such a good question because there are so many reasons, firstly, but there's also a lot of assumptions. So our kind of hashtag mantra, motto, whatever you want to call it, at Next Tech Girls is smash the stereotype. And there's lots of layers to that. There's so many stereotypes that I think put girls off. The most obvious one being, of course, that tech is for boys, that only boys could possibly be good at tech. But there's so many other ones as well. For example, lots of young people in general still assume that technology and the industry as a whole is all about coding, and that working in tech means being a software developer, means spending your whole time writing lines of code. I think one of the biggest issues that is often overlooked is actually lack of understanding of what working in tech really means and the pathways that exist to get there. We speak to lots of schools and colleges and careers advisors, and I think it's a lot easier for them to advise students to go down more traditional routes into professions like medicine or law or accountancy or teaching, because there's a really obvious pathway to get there. There's a specific course that you go and study at university, and that's how you qualify, and then you can get into that career. With tech, it's not like that. There's so many different routes in, but there's this assumption still that it's that kind of linear path, and that it's studying computer science at school, studying computer science at university, becoming a software developer. That's actually such a tiny percentage of people who work in tech that take that path or are in that role. So one thing that I've discovered through running Next Tech Girls is that it's actually less about inspiring girls or sparking an interest, and it's more about showing them what's possible. And that's through showing them women who are in tech and who are thriving and really enjoying it, and showing them the kinds of roles that they're doing and then the kind of pathways that they've taken to get there, which tend to all be very different. But the industry as a whole is still, I think, shrouded in quite a lot of mystery. And that makes it feel very inaccessible to a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really important, as you say, not to just show the, spark that interest, what you say, but show the potential, the longevity of having a career in tech. And you touched upon the your championing of role models as part of this approach. So through that approach, how much of the solution to the gender gap in tech is about that visibility versus structural opportunity?
This might be a cheat of an answer, but I think we need both. So when I started out doing this, I thought it was all about that visibility, and that was just going to fix everything, and that we just needed to show girls, women that were working in tech, that were really enjoying it, talking about what they do. But there's only so far inspiration will take you if there aren't entry-level opportunities, which, in recent years, they've really dwindled, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for young people to break into the industry. Without those opportunities, that inspiration has nowhere to go. So we do need both. We need to be creating those pathways in, and we need to be making young people, especially young women, aware of what those pathways are and why they're attractive and why they should be pursuing them.
And this leads me on actually quite well to my next question, was that Next Tech Girls partners with companies and schools to provide these kind of hands-on events and placements. What's one thing that employers often underestimate when it comes to creating these really meaningful early career experiences for young women?
I think a really common mistake that companies make is they think that once they've hired women or people from underrepresented backgrounds, their job is done. They've ticked the box, they did it. Yes, we've got X percentage of women in this new cohort of, graduates or apprentices or whatever it might be. But actually the work doesn't stop there. The work's only really just beginning. And I think a mistake that lots of companies make is not thinking about the kind of policies and processes and culture that they have in their company and how welcoming that might be for women or for, people from other underrepresented backgrounds. When they show up in the office, are they going to feel like they belong? Are they going to feel supported? Are there communities in place for them? Are there policies that will make it easy for them to do well in their jobs? And I think that's a big gap that a lot of companies really need to be focusing on a bit more. There's been some recent studies, the Lovelace report in particular, that came out last year, that went into a lot of detail on the kind of cliff. I can't remember exactly what they call it. Is it the glass cliff to match the glass ceiling? I'm not sure, but the leaky pipe, I think, is another phrase for it, which I'm not super keen on. But basically, that lots of women are leaving the tech industry. I think like a massive percentage leave by age 35, which is quite young. You've still got 30, 40 years left of your career. So, it's not enough to be getting women in. We also need to be making sure that we're making the tech industry a place that they want to stay and that they want to progress in as well.
So having that longevity of career as well is really important. And you touched on as well that your work focuses on inclusivity for girls from ethnic minority and lower income backgrounds. And we've spoken a little bit about the structural barriers here, but is there one in particular you've experienced or seen that maybe isn't talked about enough and maybe businesses need to keep a finger on the pulse too?
Yeah, I think the kind of financial barriers is a big one. I know obviously social mobility is a big thing and lots of companies try to kind of have programs where they support that. But in general, I think in tech, often it's about who you know. And most girls in our community, they don't know anyone who works in tech. They don't have any connections in tech. Their parents don't work in the tech industry. There's a lot of tech companies where they don't have official kind of formal work experience placements. It's just people bringing their kids in. There's lots of unpaid placement opportunities still, internships a lot of the time that are either unpaid or very, very low pay. And that makes them really inaccessible to people who come from, lower income families who just can't afford to be spending an entire summer, paying for trains and lunches with no or very little salary. Sometimes they're having to support their families and that's just not possible for them. So the opportunities that are given to young people to kind of help them on their way into the industry need to be made much more inclusive and much more accessible. And I think that financial side of things is really important. So we always make sure that with every event and placement that we do, that food is provided. We look at everything very kind of intersectionally. So it's not just about like the income of their family. It's also things like religion. We make sure that we have prayer rooms that people can access. Neurodivergence, we try and have quiet spaces at all of our events. It's just thinking about anything that could potentially be a barrier to someone. How can you remove that and how can you make it as comfortable and kind of accessible an opportunity for them as possible?
That's so true. And actually, it seems quite minor, but lunches, that's something that haven't even crossed my mind. And then,
especially in London, it's ridiculous the amount that you can spend even just on a sandwich. We make sure all our events, there's free food, so they just need to get themselves there and then everything's covered, food and drink throughout the day. And trying to remove some of those barriers that might mean that people can actually count themselves out. They don't even apply for it because they just think it's not something that could work for them. So bearing that in mind when you're designing these types of programs, that, if you have to know someone to get into it, or if you have to be able to afford to do it for free, then you're already massively reducing the pool of people that could possibly take part. And unfortunately, for systemic reasons, there is a big overlap in people from ethnic minority backgrounds and people from lower income backgrounds. So, there's lots of people are being excluded from those opportunities because of the way that they've been designed. So I'm really keen for more companies to start offering things like apprenticeships or degree apprenticeships for school leavers, because I think there's still a bit too much of a focus on graduate schemes as being kind of the only early career route in a lot of companies. And that assumes that people can afford to go to university. I know there are loans and there are bursaries and things, but I think often people from lower income families tend to be more nervous of the debt that university creates. And that puts them off, and so they're more likely to go down these sort of alternative routes. So it's really important to be making them more accessible and more available as well.
Completely, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about some of the kind of easy kind of wins, if you were, that companies can do to make sure that things are accessible and they're impactful. Are there any other first steps that companies can take today to start closing this beyond just pledges and recruitment target?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two main things here. So again, I'm cheating slightly by not giving you one, but one of them, shameless plug, would be engage with the next generation. Doesn't have to be through us, but it could be, and that would be wonderful. But they are the future employees, and they're the future customers as well, and consumers of like whatever products and services companies are making. So having that engagement with the next generation can be really powerful. You can get really useful insights from them. And you can start to build up a bit of a pipeline of talent that might be interested in working with you. But even if they don't work with you, just being able to show them what working in tech is really like can be quite life-changing for them. And it could mean that they do end up actually having a long and successful career in the industry. The other thing that I think is really important that I mentioned before is again, reviewing policies, processes, everything that kind of contributes to your working culture, and making sure that it is inclusive of people of different genders, of different backgrounds, with different lifestyles. There are so many programs and organizations trying to help women career switch from other industries into tech. And they often don't, again, coming back to the financial barrier, they don't take into account, a lot of people's situations. So often it's, a boot camp that you have to pay several £1,000s to do, and spend several weeks doing full time, which means you can't have a job at the same time. What about women who have children? How do they look after their children in and around that? That becomes suddenly really difficult. So it's just thinking about, within your workplace, what policies might you have just kind of taken for granted would suit everyone, that actually are either putting women off applying in the first place or making it hard for them to be their best, and to perform as well as they possibly can once they're working with you. So I think they're two very kind of practical things that companies can start doing that go beyond sort of performative actions that often are taken in March when it's International Women's Day and suddenly everyone cares. To see people, actually, and making it longer term as well and more strategic. So not kind of one-offs to tick a box, but actually making it part of the company culture that these things are regularly reviewed, and, engagements with women or young people are happening. Because it is, unfortunately, there isn't a quick fix here. This is something that we've been talking about for decades now. And it does take effort, sustained effort. It's not something that you can just run one event and suddenly it's fixed. So it does take commitment and kind of determination and long-term action to actually make a difference.
And then it's as part of your organization having these tech role models, I guess, as well, having them kind of pledge their time for the cause. How have you seen that benefit the long-term career confidence and success? And how do you even measure that impact within the organization?
Yeah, so I feel like the work that we do definitely has a long-term impact on the girls in our community, and also actually on the women that get involved. So you mentioned the role models, that's what we call the volunteers who work with us. But also the women who work with us through their company partnering with us, whether they're hosting a work experience placement or running a workshop at an event or speaking on a panel. It boosts their confidence. It makes them feel valued by their employer. They feel inspired, like all the women who get involved in our events always come away from it saying how inspired they've been to engage with these young people and hear them so kind of passionate about what they're doing and being able to share their stories with them. There's lots of different ways that we measure kind of immediate impact as well as longer term impact. So immediate impact for every event that we run, we'll measure things like what impact it might have had on their kind of future career plans in terms of whether it might be in tech or not, but also how they plan to get there. So sometimes they'll go to an event thinking they're definitely going to go to university. And just from that one event, they'll come out of it saying, actually, now this has opened my mind to other routes and I'm going to go away and look into apprenticeships, for example. We ask them questions like, would they consider working for their hosts in future, which is really helpful for us to know, because that shows the kind of impact that specific company has had on them and how kind of positively they've showcased their culture and their opportunities. Longer term, it's things like, are they coming back to our events? Do they just come to the one, or do they keep coming? Some of them, we have some girls in our community who some girls in our community who come to our events quite regularly. Every few months they'll be coming to an event. Some of them have been coming for years. They started when they were in year 10 or year 11. Now they're in the sixth form and they're still coming regularly. So that's really great feedback for us and shows that it obviously is having a positive impact on them. And we can see as well with those girls who do keep coming back, we can see how much their confidence has grown, even without them telling us that. From the first time they attend, often they come on their own. They don't know anyone else there. by the second time they're coming, and it's as if they've got close friends because then they see another girl that they met at a previous event. They're putting themselves forward for opportunities. They're speaking out a bit more. They're asking more questions. It's really nice to see their confidence grow. And then obviously longer term, it's things like, are they actually going into university to study kind of tech-related courses? We've got lots of girls now who are studying things like not just computer science, but also more specific courses like data science. AI is becoming a more common university course, software engineering, things like that, cybersecurity as well. And then, the ultimate goal, of course, is for them to actually be working in tech. So increasingly that is happening now as well, which is really great to see. And things like apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships have really helped with that too. It means that we don't have to wait quite as long to see whether a teenage girl that we've worked with actually ends up working in tech, because some of them are going in straight away at 18 rather than, needing to spend a few years doing a degree first. So obviously that's the best possible impact and feedback, is when we actually see those young women starting their careers in tech. And then lots of them do get involved through our role model community, which is really nice as well. And some of them have even started getting their companies to sponsor our events and partner with us, which is the ultimate kind of full circle experience. So that's the best thing, I think, is when the girls who've kind of benefited from our events start getting involved in helping us run them. And, they become those role models to the next generation of girls after them.
I would always feel like you're seeing someone just flourish over time. And then when they kind of repeat that cycle, that's so lovely to hear that there's been such an impact. And I guess for you as a director, seeing that, the amount of pride you must have in Next Tech Girls, that must be fantastic. And
yeah, definitely.
But what's the biggest lesson, do you think, from your career so far in Next Tech Girls? What's the biggest lesson that new collaborators might not expect?
So I think our mission statement might need updating. So our mission is, we inspire today's girls in education to become tomorrow's women in technology. And I've mentioned this a couple of times throughout this conversation, but I think actually they do need a certain level of inspiration, but that's not the most important thing. We have so many girls thousands of girls in our community. We have events where within days we have to close down applications because we're oversubscribed. The interest actually is there. That's not so much what's missing. What is missing more so, I think, is that visibility of what's possible and of how to get there. And the opportunities. There really just aren't enough opportunities. It's quite gutting, when there is a young woman who's been coming to our events regularly and has then gone on, let's say, to do a degree. We've had some young women who've gone on to do masters because they've done a degree. They've looked at what opportunities are out there. They've applied for some things. They haven't got anything. They've thought, what do I do? I'll get a master's because at least then I know what I'm doing for the next year. And they're genuinely passionate about the subject. So it's great that they want to go on and learn more. But then a year later, they find themselves in a similar position. They've got more, they're more qualified, but there still aren't many early career entry-level roles. And it's really, really hard for them to find an opportunity. So I think for me, the focus has become more on, once we get those girls inspired and interested in tech, how do we make sure they actually are getting into the industry and they're not just, applying and getting rejections and then at that very late stage changing their minds and deciding, well, if I can't get into tech, I'll have to do something else. So we're working more closely with our partners now on, early career schemes and entry-level roles, advertising them to our community, making sure that they are more aware of the roles that are out there, and giving them more support to actually get there. So we ran a new event that we'd never run before in October that we called Next Tech Ready, which was just for 50 women who were all currently applying for entry-level roles or planning to start applying within the next year. And it was entirely focused on employability skills. So we had a panel of women in early career roles in tech talking about the process that they went to get their jobs and what they think made them stand out and the kind of advice that they would give to the other women there. We had a panel of hiring managers who gave kind of secret, insider tips on what they're actually looking for when they're reviewing applications and what they want to hear in interviews. And the kind of advice that they would give people to actually stand out and get selected. We had a workshop that was all about assessment centres and how to do well in those. We had, I think, group speed mentoring sessions, and then we had like a CV and LinkedIn clinic. So it was, previously we've always focused much more on that inspiration side and being, what's the most exciting bits of tech that we can give them hands-on experience of and kind of showcase. And this was was actually putting all of that to one side, assuming that they already are interested in tech. They don't need that bit anymore. They've already started applying for roles or plan to start very soon. How can we make sure that they're actually successful in that process and that they are one of the very few who's getting selected for these very few roles that exist at the moment? So that was a first time we'd done that, but the results were really good. I can't remember the exact percentages, but it was something like 96 or 97% of attendees said that they felt confident applying for entry-level roles after attending the event. And so that's something that we're going to start doing regularly. So that'll become an annual event, hopefully bigger this year. But that's, I think, the main kind of shift that I've seen in the last few years is realizing that with the inspiration is still needed. But, you know, like your question earlier about visibility over the kind of structural opportunities, we do need both, and making sure that we're not just leaning on one side of it, that we're actually helping on the other side as well.
Like, it has to be a proper marriage between the two for us to actually make leaps forward in this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that result is absolutely fantastic. 97%, that is an incredible figure. So I congratulate on you for that as well. And looking ahead to Tech Show London, which is coming up in March on the 4th and the 5th, is that, would you say, the main conversation you're hoping to have about tech talent and inclusion? Is that the industry should be making sure they're hitting both the side of visibility and also structural opportunity?
Yes, exactly. I think I'd really like people to be coming away with really specific actions that they can take. So I'm moderating 2 panels at the event, and one of them is with 3 young women from the Next Tech Girls community who are in early career roles. So they're all within like 1 and 3 or 4 years into their careers. And they're going to be sharing the experiences that they've had started applying for those roles and starting those roles, and hopefully being very honest about what they think could have been done better. So I'm really hoping that people will come away from that session in particular with really concrete examples of things that they can take back to their offices that they can implement. But yeah, I think the early careers piece is so important. There's been some studies recently showing that the number of early careers roles in all industries, but I think particularly in tech, has reduced massively over the last few years. And one suspicion is that AI might be playing a part in it. And I think a lot of companies are, in my opinion, making the mistake of assuming that certain junior tasks can be automated, and therefore that means we don't need junior people anymore. The problem with that is your pipeline disappears. How can you ever have mid-level people and then senior people if you have no junior people? And it's you know, it's been the case in the tech industry for a long time that not enough is invested in entry-level talent. It's always seen as a big drain on, you know, people's time, because they have to invest lots of time in training these people, in supporting them and helping them and getting them up to speed, and that they're therefore not good value for money because they can't hit the ground running like an expensive, contractor or mid-level, more senior person potentially could. But I think people need to start seeing the value in having that kind of homegrown talent where you do get them in right from the start of their career, and you can really help to shape their ways of working. You do build a lot of loyalty from young people when you offer them those kinds of opportunities. And like I said, we need the pipeline. Like we can't just do away with entry-level roles and assume that we will, in a couple of years' time, have enough people to do the next level up. We need that pipeline. It's really important, and especially for representation. You know, we know that the tech industry is really not representative of society at all, and that causes a lot of problems. And if we're always just looking for people with a certain level of experience, it's going to remain that way, because you're just borrowing them from another company, you know, that's already within the industry. So to get new people in, we need to have more opportunities for people who have no experience or very, very little experience. And stop relying on borrowing those same few people that have been in the industry for years.
As you said there so eloquently, it's in everyone's best interests. Everyone's future here is dependent on the fact that we have these pathways for young people. Thank you so much, Emily. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've certainly learned a lot about yourself and about Next Tech Girls, and I can't wait to see the SEF month in March, on the 4th and 5th of March.
Yeah, just thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm very much looking forward to Tech Show London.